Have you ever wondered what time sounds like when it doesn't tick? Tonight we walk through snow that remembers its own falling toward a distant beat, carried by wind, soft, steady, older than ours. We follow not a clock, but the rhythm of reindeer and wind drums into the dreamlike hush of Sami timekeeping. Unless, of course, you know how to decode antler shadows in moonlight, because otherwise you probably won't survive this calendar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love watching time stretch across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move slowly across snow packed into memory beneath an aurora that swirls like painted breath. Every step sinks just enough to remind you you're still walking, but barely. The cold is not harsh. It's meditative, the kind that hushes your thoughts like a mitten over your mind. Ahead on the horizon flickers a small red light. It isn't a fire. It's the reflection of drum paint catching aurora shimmer, and nearby the faintest sound. A heartbeat made from reindeer hide and pine root. You approach slowly. The goavdis, the Sámi wind drum, rests against a low stone. The hide is pale, stretched tight over an oval frame. Symbols burned or inked arc across its surface like constellations with secrets too old to shout. A mainstream ethnographic fact: Sámi wind drums goavdis, or gievrie, depending on dialect, were traditionally made from hollowed pine or birch, stretched with reindeer hide, and used by Noaidi Sámi shamans to divine answers, speak with spirits, or navigate dream journeys. Each drum was deeply personal and often passed through generations. You crouch next to it, fingertips hovering just above the surface. The drum doesn't ask to be struck. It waits to be listened to. Painted symbols include the sun cross the cloudberry moon and a line of small arrows, perhaps migration paths, or perhaps spirit footprints. You try not to blink. The drum looks back. A quirky detail: some Noaidi believed their drums held a spirit of their own, an unnamed consciousness that slept between uses. If you played too often or without purpose, it might grow tired or mischievous. One tale tells of a drum that hummed when ignored for too long, waking its owner at precisely 3:11 a.m. for 3 nights in a row. You imagine that hum now. It would sound like wind caught between antlers, like snow brushing the side of a tent, like time tapping its fingers when no one's counting. You glance upward. The aurora dances above like a question without a need for an answer. A line of light curls green and violet, then vanishes into black sky again. You follow a set of prints around the drum. Reindeer hooves, not fresh, but not old either. They move in a gentle arc around the instrument, pausing only once just beside a notch in the stone where an old spoon lies frozen into place. You smile. Not everything that follows the drum walks on 2 legs. A scholarly mystery remains about the precise use of each drum's symbols. While many believe they served as spirit maps linking worlds or marking celestial events, others argue they were personal visual codes rooted in the dreams and memories of the drum maker alone. You sit now beside it, close but not touching, because the drum has already said enough for tonight, and tomorrow it will speak again, if the wind allows it. You rise slowly, brushing snow from your coat sleeve, and follow the line of reindeer prints. They wind eastward downhill through a shallow ravine where the trees lean like listeners. The cold air tightens around your ankles, but your breath stays soft and steady, like you're walking inside a story the wind doesn't want to end. Because tonight you walk in reindeer time, where calendars wear antlers, and the seasons are stitched together by hooves, not hands. The prints aren't random. You begin to notice the rhythm: 4 short strides, a pause, a patch of disturbed snow where they've scraped for lichen, then onward. These aren't just movements. They're measurements, a mainstream historical truth, for the Sami time was traditionally measured by the movement of reindeer herds. Instead of numbered months, they used terms tied to reindeer behavior: calving season, antler shedding, migration, mating, and the frost that clings to whiskers at the year's edge. You kneel beside a particularly deep print. It's fresh, crisp around the edges. The snow inside still glows faintly with the warmth of a recent step. You whisper, "Ojja I godat." A new season. You rise and walk. The path begins to curve with a gentle purpose, as if even the landscape understands how to keep time. In the low birch branches, someone has hung a bundle of dried crowberries wrapped in red sinew and knotted with 3 loops. Not a snack. A marker. One you don't move. Someone will know what it means. Maybe it's a reminder that spring will come back even when the snow pretends otherwise. A quirky custom, Sami families sometimes marked time using antlers themselves. By scratching notches onto shed antlers, they recorded seasonal events, calving storms, migrations, and even dreams. Some antlers became household calendars kept by the fire, added to with each year. You stop beside a flat rock partially buried in snow. It's been painted faint red ochre outlines of a sun and 2 curved shapes that might be rivers or reindeer. The lines are deliberate but not detailed, like someone reminded time but didn't want to explain too much. You touch the edge of the rock gently. It's cold, but not unfriendly. You remember a phrase an elder once told an ethnographer: time walks beside the herd. You do not need to count, it only follow its feet. A scholarly debate lingers around the Sami calendar words. Some believe the time terms were strictly tied to ecological signs: snowmelt, moss growth, daylight hours. Others argue they were layered ecological, spiritual, and emotional. That a word for the time of waiting didn't just mean between seasons, it meant a feeling. You keep walking, not because you're in a hurry, but because the reindeer prints haven't stopped yet. And neither has time. Up ahead, a wide clearing opens lichen-patched and quiet. The wind curls once around your coat, then moves on content. You stand there for a moment, surrounded by stillness that is measuring you back. And you realize you're not lost. You're just inside the rhythm. The clearing stretches wide, ringed by birch and time-worn pine. In the center, a snow-covered rise breaks gently from the ground, not quite a hill, not quite flat. It's the kind of shape that doesn't show up on maps, but shows up in memory, in story, and sometimes in song. You walk toward it slowly, sensing this is not a place for rushing. Because tonight, we enter the hands and heat that bring the wind drum into being, a circle of hide and wood that holds stories older than its owner and beats dreams into direction. You find the stump of a felled pine half buried. Its trunk lies nearby, carefully hollowed out, scraped smooth on the inside. Someone has already done the first work. This was a drum in progress, or perhaps a drum in pause, in a mainstream ethnographic fact. Sami wind drums were typically made by carefully selecting and hollowing pine or birch, shaping the frame with precision and stretching reindeer hide across the surface. The hide was often prepared from a reindeer killed during a significant moment birth migration or celestial event. The drum's resonance depended on spirit season and the quiet with which it was made. You kneel beside the hollow log. Inside it, a few scattered items remain: a sliver of bark, a strand of sinew, a piece of flat stone stained with ochre, and a single carved antler tip, perhaps meant to be a beater, or maybe just a marker left behind in love. The hide isn't here, but the drum is already listening. You press a hand to the wood. Cold, smooth, dense. It smells faintly of resin and silence. A quirky tradition says that a true drum maker always sleeps with the wood beside them for one night before bending it into a circle. This gives the wood a chance to dream and let go of its tree thoughts. If the wood does not creak or split in the night, it's ready to become something new. You smile. You imagine that night, the maker curled beside the unfinished rim, whispering old stories into the pine's quiet grain. You look up. On a nearby rock, someone has drawn with ash or charcoal a sun cross, 2 lines for the horizon, and a tiny dot, perhaps a reindeer, or perhaps you. You walk the circle of the clearing. The wind stays low, respectful. And just at the edge, you find a thin stick stuck upright in the snow, its tip painted red. It marks where the drum's voice last stood. A scholarly mystery surrounds the specific symbols painted on Sami drums. Some clearly depict cosmological worlds, others migration routes or animal spirits. But a few, like the cloudberry moon or the repeated spiral footprint near lakes, have no known explanation. Were they spiritual paths, joke symbols, personal emblems only understood by the Noidis who dreamed them? You squat near the stick, careful not to cast a shadow over it, and you whisper not a question, just a breath. Because some drums were not meant to answer. Some were meant to remind you that you are already inside the answer. You rise and snow falls lightly again, soft flakes catching in your hair and along the rim of your sleeves. The pine log watches you go, not as an object, but as a future voice waiting to be warmed into rhythm. You leave the clearing with slow steps, the pine log behind you still cradling its own silence. The trail ahead is thinner now, barely more than a seam in the snow, perhaps made by reindeer, perhaps memory. The wind is gentle, still, but you notice it now not as cold, but as a carrier of echoes of symbols of breath. Because tonight we step softly into the realm of the Noaidi, the Sami shaman, who read not clocks or books, but drum beats and shifting snow light. The ones who used the goavdis not just to mark seasons, but to open doors. You walk through a narrow birch grove, the trees arching like listeners. The wind drum sound is gone now, yet not entirely. It hums beneath your steps, low and steady like something beneath the ice, still breathing. A mainstream ethnographic truth. The Noaidi was a ritual specialist healer and spirit communicator in Sami society. Using the drum, they entered trance states to ask questions, retrieve lost knowledge, or speak across worlds. A key tool was the vuorbi, a small pointer or charm, often brass antler or bone, placed on the drum skin, which would move in response to tapping and vibration, indicating the answer through its path across the painted symbols. You pause near a large boulder, split down the middle like a peeled orange. On its inner face, someone has carved a faint circle. Within it, a spiral, a reindeer, and a bird. You place your hand on the stone. It's colder than the snow around it. A small piece of brass lies frozen nearby, perhaps a vuorbi, perhaps a memory. A quirky legend tells of a Noaidi whose drum was said to be so attuned that it once refused to sound when a visitor lied in his presence. When the man asked a question, the drum gave no reply. The Noaidi simply nodded and said, "You've already hidden your truth. Why ask for more?" You continue walking. At the edge of the grove, you find a ring of stones no taller than your knee. In the center, charred wood. A ceremonial fire pit, perhaps. But it's the space around it that feels heavier, like the forest leans in closer here. You sit on a nearby stump. The snow whispers beneath you. And you listen. Because this is where the Noaidi would drum into trance, letting the vuorbi slide across the skin, tapping softly until its pointer found a sign. Maybe the sun wheel. Maybe the underworld. Maybe a symbol no one but that drum had ever held. A scholarly debate remains unresolved. Were the movements of the vuorbi the result of spiritual forces, or simply the nuanced hand of the shaman guiding it in a kind of subconscious divination? Some argue the Noaidi entered an altered state where the answers truly came through them, not from them. Others note that to explain too much is to miss the point entirely. You gaze into the ashes, not glowing, not recent, but unforgotten. You think of the Noaidi sitting where you sit, snow falling just the same, listening for the rhythm that only comes when questions are asked softly enough for the world to answer. The bird carved in the stone still looks east. You follow its gaze and see nothing but the long white fold of the horizon. That's enough. You rise. And as you step forward, a single snowflake lands on your glove, perfectly round with a tiny hole in its center. like the drum, like the eye of the world, watching gently, waiting patiently. The snow deepens as you cross into a wide, flat basin where the land dips just enough to cradle the wind. The sky overhead holds the faintest hue of green, a smear of aurora that looks more like breath than light. It's not dramatic. It doesn't need to be. It just lingers like a symbol drawn for someone who already knows what it means. Because tonight you kneel before the painted hide and try to understand what the sun spirals and cloudberry moons once told the hand that drew them. You reach a solitary drum resting on a birch sled half buried in snow. Its hide, though weathered, still shows the faded traces of red, black, and charcoal, a language of circles, lines, and shapes that feel like they belong to the land more than to any one person. You kneel beside it, close but careful, but the central figure is unmistakable. A sun cross, arms wide, equal each quadrant filled with faint dots. At its edge, what looks like a reindeer standing beside a small spiral, maybe a trail, maybe time. A mainstream ethnographic fact. Sami drums were often painted with symbolic maps of the cosmos, land, and spirit. The sun commonly represented the life force and upper world, while reindeer could symbolize movement, sustenance, or the middle realm. Other shapes, stars, humans. Fishbirds could vary wildly between drums customized for the Noaides' unique needs and stories. To the lower right, a small round symbol appears faintly yellowed against the hide. The cloudberry moon. You trace its shape with your eyes. One elder described it as the moment in summer when the moon hangs over the bogs just before the berries ripen, a sweetness that time waits for. The symbol marked transition taste and sometimes thresholds between health and illness. A quirky tradition says that if a Noaide dreamed of the cloudberry moon twice in the same week, they were to remain silent for a full day, as they were being told more than words could carry. You glance at the rest of the drum. There's a spiral that doesn't connect to anything, and a strange forked line that almost looks like a tree, but one root is reaching upward, not down. You tilt your head. Symbols are not meant to be puzzles. They are companions meant to walk beside meaning, not block its path. You sit back on your heels, listening to the sound the snow doesn't make. Then you remember the story of the upside-down antler sign, a marking found on only 2 surviving drums. Its meaning unknown. Some say it was a kind of personal emblem, others a warning, others a joke left for future dreamers. You look again. There, hidden beneath a faded ink splotch, you swear you see it. A faint antler curling downward instead of up. You smile. Because even sacred instruments are allowed to laugh sometimes. A scholarly mystery surrounds whether the symbols were read aloud, interpreted in trance, or held private by the Noaide. Many believe they were not read in the way we read text, but felt entered or navigated like landscapes. You didn't decode them. You sat beside them until they opened on their own. You rise slowly. The drum remains, its paint pale, its skin stiff, but its language still entirely intact. It has not been erased. It has simply waited. And as you turn to leave the basin, the aurora thickens just slightly overhead. Not a flare, just a breath. A flicker of green winding into a curve that looks, if you squint, just a little like an antler or a question. You move beyond the painted drum, now stepping through snow that barely reaches your ankles, but feels as thick as memory. The land slopes gently downward, and ahead the trees thin out into an open white plain. It's not the kind of clearing that announces itself. It just arrives like a pause in a sentence you hadn't noticed you were reading. Because tonight, you step into the layered worlds of Sami cosmology, where the drum is not just a surface, but a map of everything. The upper world, the middle world, the underworld. You stand at the edge of the plain and look up. The sky stretches in a wide blue-black arc, quiet matte, and speckled with stars you don't quite recognize. Somewhere up there is the upper world Radian's realm, where the Great Spirit watches from above, not as a figure, but as a force, a design of wind, sun, and unknowable timing. A mainstream ethnographic fact. Sami cosmology traditionally divides existence into 3 worlds. The upper world is the divine, radiant, and distant. The middle world is where humans, reindeer, and daily life take place. And the underworld is not hellish, but hidden a place of roots, dreams, and transformation. The drum connects them all. You cross the plain. Ahead, half buried in snow, a stone ring appears, 12 smooth rocks no taller than your knee set in a wide circle. Not a fire ring, a marker. You walk the outside. The wind changes slightly, curling around your collar, as if reminding you that this is not a site for answers, but for balance. You think of the drum. On many surviving Goavdis, the upper world is drawn at the top of the hide, the middle world across the center, and the underworld at the bottom sometimes, with rivers, fish, and curled animal forms. One drum shows a reindeer halfway submerged, head in the middle, hooves in the under. Neither lost nor trapped, just passing through. A quirky interpretation says the middle world is where your boots get wet, and the underworld is where your bones still dream. Children were told not to sleep with both hands beneath their pillow, or they might wake up having visited the root trails where foxes carry messages in their tails, and time runs in circles. You step gently across the center of the ring. Nothing marks the middle, but the air feels thicker. Not oppressive, just full. You kneel, place a hand in the snow. There's no heat, but the sensation is familiar, like touching an old drum skin that hasn't been played in generations, but still remembers its last beat. A scholarly debate continues around how the Noaidi traveled through these worlds. Was it through trance, sleep, symbolic storytelling, or a combination of all 3? Many say the drum didn't guide them. It became them. The skin was their sky, the frame their path, and the vuorbi their animal companion across the veil. You sit in the ring now, letting the stars overhead fall into the pattern the drum once held. Upper, middle, under. Each world not stacked above or below, but held together like threads in a braided cord. Each accessible not by stairs or flight, but by stillness, rhythm, and permission. You close your eyes for a moment. The snow settles quietly around your boots. You do not fall asleep, but you leave just a little, and when you open your eyes again, the sky is exactly where you left it, but it seems to be watching you back. The wind returns light, slow, almost too soft to notice at first, but it carries with it something you hadn't expected: breath. Not yours, not human. The kind of steady, warm exhale that only comes from a creature with fur hooves and a patience older than memory. Because tonight you walk beside the herd, not in front, not behind, but at their rhythm. Because reindeer don't follow time. They are time. You step beyond the stone ring, and there between two patches of snow-stained lichen stand the first signs of movement. Small prints, crescent-shaped, the edges ragged from melt and shift. Reindeer have passed here, maybe last night, maybe this morning, or maybe they've always passed here, and the snow just remembers best. A mainstream ethnographic fact: Sami reindeer herding traditions are among the most ancient and complex pastoral systems in the north. The reindeer's behavior, not just its migration, but its antler cycles, fur texture, even breathing patterns form the basis of traditional Sami calendars. Where the herd walks, the season changes. You crouch low, examining a set of overlapping prints. One larger, one smaller. A calf, a mother. The snow indented slightly deeper on the front edge she was turning. You follow without stepping directly into the path. That would be rude. The wind carries a scent now: lichen and wet fur, and something else. The metallic sharpness of an old bell rung faintly from far away. You crest a low hill and pause. Below you, a cluster of reindeer lying together in the snow. Still, blending so well with the terrain, you almost missed them. One raises its head, looks at you, blinks once, then rests again. No fear, just acknowledgement. You remain where you are, because here you're not a watcher. You're a guest of time. A quirky tradition among older Sami reindeer herders describes listening for the breath of the herd before planning a move. If the collective exhale sounded high and light, it meant the animals were anxious too soon to travel. If it was low and slow, the path was ready. Some herders swore the herd could breathe in a new season, often days before signs appeared in the landscape. You listen now. The breath is even. The hooves are still. The snow creaks only beneath your own weight. You sit at the edge of the hill and think about how the reindeer shed their antlers not all at once, not on cue, but as a quiet ritual of growth and letting go. Males drop theirs in winter, females in spring. The herd changes shape across the calendar, not in numbers, in silhouettes. A scholarly mystery lingers around how Sami communities historically integrated such subtle biological cues into navigation and planning. Without writing, without clocks, they still managed to predict storms, migrations, births, and seasons with remarkable accuracy. Some say it was intuition. Others embedded generational knowledge passed through story sight and breath. You notice now a single antler lying in the snow a few meters downslope. Pale, clean, no blood, just left behind like punctuation at the end of a season. You don't touch it. Instead, you bow your head slightly, because that antler isn't discarded. It's marking a shift. The herd stirs. 2 calves rise, shake their fur, then nuzzle into the flanks of their mothers. You stand slowly. No sudden movements. And you step backward, retracing your trail, but not erasing it. Just as the snow will do. Because here in the middle world, time moves at the pace of hooves, and you are lucky to have walked beside it, even for a moment. The snow thickens again as you leave the resting herd behind, their breathing barely audible now beneath the hush of twilight wind. You step back into the folds of birch and pine, where shadows lengthen with a kind of slow permission. Your breath curls before you like a ribbon winding ahead through branches hung with old frost and older memory. Because tonight, we walk beside the women who counted snow and shadow, the ones who tended not just food and fire, but time itself read from lichen antlers and the tilt of distant clouds. The forest narrows to a corridor of soft-boughed trees, and there, leaning gently against a trunk, you see it, a bundle of reindeer sinew tied into 3 loops and hung with dried lichen and a shard of quartz. Not decoration. A marker, perhaps for direction. Perhaps for memory, perhaps for rhythm. A mainstream ethnographic fact, Sami women played essential roles in seasonal migration food preservation and oral calendar keeping. They often passed knowledge of weather plant cycles, herd fertility, and seasonal signs through domestic ritual story song, and small markers woven into everyday objects, braids of sinew, carved bone spoons, or lichen bundles hung on doorposts. You crouch beside the hanging loop. It sways only slightly, no wind strong enough to move it really. Yet there it goes, slow and steady like it remembers dancing. You sit back on your heels, pressing your hand into the mossy snow. Here under the surface, roots speak to one another birch lichen and time-sharing nutrients and news. You imagine a Sami woman bending over this patch 200 years ago, sniffing the lichen and saying simply, 3 more days. Because lichen don't lie. A quirky bit of folklore says that the color of lichen under snow, whether it holds its green or fades to gray, can signal the lateness of spring. Women would sometimes press the lichen to their tongue. Bitter meant snow would stay. Sweet meant melt would come. Children learned these cues before they learned numbers. You walk on the path barely visible now beneath the rising dark. A small leather pouch hangs from a low branch ahead. It jingles faintly as you approach. inside dried herbs, maybe juniper or angelica, a snow-preserved note perhaps, or a grandmother's reminder to a future child. The wind carries the faintest echo of joik, an ancient Sámi singing tradition. You don't hear it as song. You feel it as vibration. A hum through your bones. A rhythm of remembering. A scholarly conversation surrounds the often overlooked matrilineal patterns of Sámi knowledge, especially in regions where Christianity discouraged drum use. Women unable to keep or play drums openly continued to carry time through herbs, cooking, storytelling, and constellation names. One historian wrote, "The antlers passed through the men. The seasons passed through the women. You stop at a clearing. Someone has stacked 3 stones, flat, small, and curved. Beside them, a birch ladle frozen into the snow, its bowl upturned, holding nothing but a few pine needles and a single crowberry. You take nothing. But you whisper, 'I see you.' Because this was not placed for use, it was placed for continuity. You move on as the night folds deeper. Your feet crunch softly. And behind you the bundle of sinew swings one final time, then rests. The birch trees begin to thin again, their white bark peeling like forgotten notes, and ahead, the land rises gently toward a narrow crest. The air sharpens, not with cold, but with presence, like the forest has stepped back to let something older breathe. Because tonight, you walk a path that isn't marked on any map. A trail of sacred sites not made of monuments but of stones, snow trails and drum echoes that never entirely fade. You crest the hill and pause. Below you, a wide stretch of snow undisturbed by track or branch. In the center, a cluster of standing stones no taller than your thigh, spaced in deliberate silence. One leans slightly worn smooth by wind. Another is capped with ice, glittering in the starlight. There is no fence, no marker, no sign, but this place remembers things. A mainstream ethnographic fact. Many Sámi ritual sites were simple stone circles, natural mounds or snow-cleared clearings used for offerings, trance work, or transitions. Unlike the monumental traditions of other ancient cultures, Sámi sacred geography was subtle, often hidden, and deeply tied to natural forms and patterns in the land. You descend slowly. The snow here crunches differently sharper, more deliberate, as if each step must be measured. You approach the first stone and stop just before it. It's warm. Or maybe your glove is warm. Or maybe something here is awake. A few feet away, pressed into the snow, you notice a trail, not footprints, but drag marks, delicate and purposeful. As if someone had pulled a sled, or perhaps dragged a drum on hide cords. The trail curves through the stones, circles the largest, then disappears into a hollow beneath a drift. A quirky story tells of a Noaidi who could find sacred spaces by listening to how snow fell between stones. If it whispered, the place was ordinary. If it hummed even silently, the site was meant for the drum. They carried their goavdis not on their back, but on a sled lined with crow feathers, so the spirits would hear it arriving. You walk the trail slowly following the arc around the central stone. It is marked not with symbols, but with moss green even now in the depths of snow. A patch shaped vaguely like a bird wings unfurled. You don't touch it, but you nod and sit, not on the stone, beside it, as if you've arrived late to a circle that never ends. The stars above are sharper now, more deliberate. The northern lights dance low across the far sky. No spectacle, just movement with meaning. You begin to hear or feel something soft. Not quite a drumbeat. Not quite breath. But familiar. A scholarly puzzle surrounds many Sami sacred sites. Without written records, ethnographers rely on oral accounts, drum symbols, and subtle alignments in landscape. Some sites seem oriented with solstice light, others with migration lines, but most seem to follow a logic deeper than calendar or compass intuition memory, and return. You look back down at the trail. Fresh snow has begun to fall lightly, quietly, respectfully, and the marks you followed, already fading. But the feeling of the path remains, in your chest, in the hush, in the steady beat of the stars above. You rise, step backward, bowing just slightly to the stone behind you, and walk toward the next silence, because in this part of the world the land is louder than it looks. And you're still listening. The sky is fully ink now, no longer navy, no longer violet. Just deep Arctic black, textured with stars and the slow pulsing breath of green light. You walk beside a narrow drift, your footsteps muffled to nothing. Each inhalation draws not just cold, but time, like you're breathing centuries into your lungs and exhaling them back as steam. Because tonight, we sit beside a drum not as an object, but as a map, a world curled into hide and wood, where every tremble is a footstep and every symbol a possibility. You come upon a half-buried sled frame, its harness broken, its ribs stripped of covering but still curved into the shape of motion. At its center, cushioned in frost and a blanket of woven reed, lies a wind drum. This one is smaller oval, with the hide cracked in places, but the symbols still visible. You brush the frost from its face carefully. 3 suns, a cross, a curved fish, and at the bottom right, a spiral touching a circle connected by a faint meandering line. You sit before it. No vorbi, no stick, just your breath. A mainstream ethnographic fact. In ritual, the Noaidi would strike the drum with a reindeer horn hammer, while the vorbi, usually a ring or figurine of brass or bone, was placed on the hide. The vibration would cause the vorbi to move across the symbols, revealing paths, messages, or answers. To outsiders, it looked like magic. To the Sámi, it was communication with the world beyond words. You imagine the vorbi now, its little legs skittering across the hide, landing perhaps on the fish meaning illness, or the sun meaning change, or the spiral whose meaning no one agrees on, but everyone respects. A quirky belief says that if the Vuorbi stopped in the same place 3 times, the questioner had not been honest with themselves. The drum could only answer those who already suspected the truth. You reach into your coat, not for a question, but for a gesture. You place a smooth stone on the snow beside the drum, warmed in your pocket from earlier today, perhaps meaningless, perhaps just right. You breathe, and the stars shimmer slightly. You tilt your head. No sound, but something feels like a reply. The path forward glows with moonlight. You don't remember the moon rising, but there it is, brushing snow into shadow, creating just enough contrast for you to see where the path bends, wins, and disappears behind the next hill. You think of the drum again, of how a Noaidi might have held it not for power, but for navigation, not to control events, but to find footing inside them. A scholarly mystery remains. Did the drum provide answers, or simply guide focus? Was the Vuorbi's movement divine, spiritual, psychological, or metaphorical? Did it answer questions or turn them inside out, until the questioner no longer needed to ask? You rise, not with certainty, with clarity. Because the drum never told anyone what to do. It showed them where they already were. And that in the Arctic world of layered time is more than enough. You bow slightly, tuck the stone deeper into the snow, and follow the path. No destination. Just the next shape in the snow. The trail dips into a narrow gully, where the snow lies undisturbed except for a soft indent here, a twig there, and what looks like the ghost of a hoofprint. Above the moon rides low silver round and just slightly blurred at the edges. It doesn't illuminate. It lingers. Because tonight, we follow a rhythm that isn't marked by clocks or calendars. We follow the rhythm of reindeer time, the poetic pulse of seasons told through hooves, rivers, and slow burning lichen. At the bend of the trail, you pause beside a frozen stream. Its surface is clouded but intact, the kind of ice that sings when it settles. You listen not for sound, but for tone, a feeling in the soles of your feet, in your knees, in the way your breath slows of its own accord. A mainstream ethnographic fact, traditional Sami life was deeply synchronized to the reindeer herding cycle, but also to natural signals like snow crust, hardness, sun angle, river freeze patterns, and even the wind's direction during sunrise. The Sami calendar wasn't linear. It was a returning circle shaped by both biology and landscape. You crouch by the ice and notice tiny bubbles suspended within small white orbs in slow motion ascent. You place a gloved hand gently on the surface. A soft crack. Not dangerous. Just acknowledgement. The river hears you. You smile. High on a branch above a bit of colored thread flutters. Red gold and a single white bead tied at the end. A marker, perhaps, or a calendar note. Something placed with purpose and left for wind to read. You remember the Sami phrase for a time of stillness, be'aivash lea gachchon. The sun has sat down. It doesn't mean night. It means now is not the time to move. A quirky seasonal marker tells of the resting hooves, a period when the reindeer stand still longer between steps, sniffing more before grazing, blinking slowly. Elders would watch the herd and know it is the time before the melt when moving too soon means losing footing. So they waited not with impatience, but with fire story and soup. You sit beside the stream now, not because you're tired, because you're in agreement. You look up at the stars, spaced wider, now sky cleared from its earlier haze. One blinks brighter than the rest. You wonder if it's part of the spring pattern, a constellation used to mark calving or berry thaw, or the last safe travel over frozen rivers. A scholarly curiosity persists about the extent to which Sami seasonal timing was astronomical versus environmental. Some accounts describe precise stargazing knowledge, others speak only of reindeer breath, the angle of a tree's shadow at midday, or how long a kettle takes to boil in March. You reach into your pocket and pull out a small stone, one you've carried since the first drum. You place it on the ice. It doesn't crack, it holds. You nod, because now even the frozen stream agrees. This is not the time to rush. It is the time between pulses, between hoofbeats, between drags of the sun across the sky. You rise slowly, turn upstream, where the next bend waits, not with answers, but with the next slow unfolding. The river disappears behind you, slipping under snow and time. You climb a low rise, where the trees thin into long rows like sentences in a lullaby. Each step feels quieter, not because the world has hushed, but because you've learned to move more softly inside it. Because tonight, we open a different kind of almanac, not made of pages, but of birch bark breath and meals remembered like moon phases. This is the Sámi oral calendar, where time lives not in ink, but in story ritual and the layering of memory onto daily life. At the top of the rise, a small structure leans into the wind, a kota, the traditional Sámi tent built of poles and skins, its frame laced in circles that mirror the rhythm of the seasons. You kneel at the flap, but don't enter. Not yet. Instead, you listen. Inside, there's no sound, but the air smells faintly of smoke, dried fish, and juniper. You step in slowly, ducking your head. The interior is dark, but not empty. A ring of stones marks a long, cooled fire. Against one wall, bundles of dried herbs hang in woven netting. In the center, a birch bark scroll folded many times and tied with sinew. You sit before it and imagine what it holds. A mainstream ethnographic fact. While the Sámi did not traditionally use written calendars, they preserved seasonal knowledge through oral transmission embedded in song food and ritual. Some families used birch bark notebooks scratched with symbols or folded with scented plants to pass along memories of timing, when to migrate, when to salt fish, when to tell certain stories. You open the scroll. It's blank now, but the scent remains angelica, wild thyme, and salt. Someone once used this not to write, but to remember. A quirky tradition held that meals marked time as surely as moons. There were soups only made when calves were born. Berries eaten only after the third melt. Fat saved from the first autumn kill to be rendered on the darkest night when stories of ancestors were told beside flickering coals and cups of bone broth. You lie back on the floor of the kota. Look up through the smoke hole now covered in a veil of frost. You think of how children once learned time by smell. That when dried fish returned, it meant 2 snows until thaw. That when a mother ground pine bark into flour, it meant the hunger moon. That when butter froze too hard to spread, it meant stories must be told instead. A scholarly reflection suggests that Sámi memory wasn't about keeping a schedule, it was about keeping belonging. A community was in sync with the land, not because of instruction, but because of layered recall, each generation tucking another strand into the braid of the season. You rise slowly, fold the scroll, and place it back on the low shelf. You whisper, "Muy toot, muy toot." Memories, memories, because they are not gone. They're resting, like dough under cloth, like lichen under snow, like stories in the belly waiting for just the right wind to carry them forward. Outside, the snow has softened, and ahead, a trail of half-buried prints in the direction of a darker wood. You follow, because even silence leaves footprints, and you know how to read them now. You step back into the night, leaving the kota behind you, like the closing of a book whose scent lingers on your sleeves. The snow has shifted, no longer falling, just hovering in the air like dust caught in a beam of thought. And up ahead, a darker forest rises dense and quiet. Because tonight, we walk into the hush that followed the silencing of the drums, a time when wind rhythms were stilled and the antlers of time bent under the weight of foreign fires. The trail narrows. The snow crunches differently here, heavier, slower, like it remembers too much. You pass under branches that droop with frost and silence. And there, at the base of a tree, you find what you hoped you wouldn't. A drum. Cracked. Split across its center like a wound frozen open. A mainstream historical fact. During the 17th and 18th centuries, Sámi drums were systematically confiscated and destroyed by Christian missionaries and colonial administrators. The drums were labeled instruments of devil worship. Many were burned. Others were taken to museums. Some Noaidi were imprisoned, or worse, for refusing to give them up. You kneel beside the broken instrument. Its frame has splintered, but part of the hide remains curled like old paper. No symbols are visible, just ghosts of paint, water warped and peeled. The wood smells faintly of ash. Someone tried to save it, and someone else tried to end it. A quirky piece of history. In some regions, Sámi people began hiding their drums inside the walls of kotas, beneath floorboards, or in riverbanks wrapped in cloth and sealed with birch sap. One story tells of a family who buried theirs with salt and crow feathers, believing it would sleep but not die. You touch the rim of the drum. A splinter loosens and falls into the snow. Not as a cry, just as a reminder. Around you, the forest tightens its grip. not unkind, just protective. This is where the songs went quiet, where breath was held instead of offered, where the vorby stopped skittering, and the stories had to take new shapes: smoke, bread, dreams, anything but sound. A scholarly debate continues about the cultural cost of the drum bands. Some argue the loss was spiritual more than practical. Others say the oral memory systems absorbed the blow. But all agree something deep was interrupted. Not destroyed, but buried. You take a breath and say softly, "You were not forgotten." The forest seems to shift, not forward, but inward, like a lung releasing its longest-held breath. You rise, stepping carefully past the shattered drum, and at the edge of the path, tucked into a fold of tree root, you see something left behind a stone, a piece of antler, and a tiny loop of brass wire, no larger than a fingertip. The vorby. You pick it up. It's cold. It's weightless. It's waiting. You don't carry it. You place it beside the drum, because not all silence asks to be broken. Some silence asks to be honored. And you walk on not with sadness, but with a softened kind of listening. The kind that knows some rhythms don't stop. They just get quieter, until someone dares to beat the drum again. The forest begins to open again, not suddenly, but with the slow grace of something long held letting go. The snow lies unbroken except for one narrow furrow, dragging in a slow curve toward the east. It could be a reindeer trail, or a sled, or just the memory of something returning. Because tonight, we follow the sound of revival, the gentle but insistent heartbeat of a drum returning through snow, wind, and generations of quiet. At the edge of the clearing, you find a modern kota. Its poles are fresh, cut clean. Its canvas taut against the cold. A wisp of smoke rises from its crown like a thought not yet spoken aloud. You approach slowly. No dogs bark. No one steps out. But the flap is slightly open, and inside a faint rhythm. A mainstream ethnographic fact. In recent decades, Sami communities across Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia have seen a resurgence of drum-making joik singing and cultural reconnection. New drums are being carved, old songs retaught. The Goavdis is no longer just a museum piece. It is being played again in ceremonies, in protests, in quiet rooms where ancestors are finally being heard. You step inside the kota. It is warm. A fire crackles low at the center, and across from you sits a young woman, back straight, eyes closed. She holds a drum in her lap, oval reindeer hide stretched perfectly, symbols etched in ochre and blue. Her thumb taps the rim. Once, twice. Pause. Then again. Each beat lands not like a sound, but like a returning. You don't speak. She doesn't look up. But you know you're welcome. You sit cross-legged near the edge of the space, just inside the ring of firelight. Above the smoke hole glows with green. The aurora has returned, drawn by rhythm. A quirky note passed between young Sami drummers says that if your first dream after carving a new drum includes reindeer, you must paint a new symbol on the skin before ever playing it. One drummer painted a small, sideways fox, another a ladle. One simply added a dot and called it Grandmother's Breath. The woman finishes her pattern, then opens her eyes. They meet yours, and she smiles, not with triumph, with recognition. A scholarly observation describes the revival of Sámi drumming as not a resurrection, but a continuity. The knowledge was never entirely gone. It was held quietly in gestures, plant lore lullabies, and in the way people stepped around certain stones. The drum's rhythm simply followed the herd into the trees, and now it has returned. You reach into your pocket. Take out the small offering you didn't know you'd carried an antler shaving from the broken drum site. You offer it. The woman nods once, places it gently beside her fire. No ceremony, just inclusion. You sit together in the quiet, the drum between you humming with recent memory. The aurora shimmers again. Outside, the snow begins to fall softly. And in that moment, you understand this is not a revival. It is a drumbeat that paused mid-measure. And now, with one soft breath, it plays on. You step out into the snow again, the warmth of the kota still clinging to your sleeves like the last syllable of a lullaby. Behind you, the drumbeat fades, not because it has stopped, but because the wind has chosen to carry it differently now. Softer, broader, like memory choosing how it returns. Tonight, we rest beside the herd as twilight deepens. The fire dims, and the rhythm of hooves becomes the clock we trust most. The aurora stretches far across the sky, now more ribbon than river, more hush than color. It sways slow and wide green and soft as moss under melting snow. You follow a line of recent prints, 3 reindeer, maybe 4, curving through the lowland toward their winter grounds. And there they are. A small cluster, lying still, breath fogging the night in gentle puffs. Their ears flick once, then settle. They don't rise, they don't flee, because they remember you. Because time knows your footsteps now. You sit at a respectful distance, close enough to listen, far enough to belong without breaking the stillness. A mainstream cultural truth. For Sámi herders, the herd is not livestock. It is part of the family part of the land's cycle, and part of how people understand their place in the year. Even the word for year, jaki, shares root with jahkasash, meaning age, or the time a being lives. In Sámi thought, time is not just tracked, it is lived with. You rest your hands in your lap. Breathe. The herd breathes with you. One calf stirs and stands, sniffs the wind, and stares at the north for no particular reason. You follow its gaze and feel something shift, not in the air, but in the quiet beneath your ribs. A quirky story tells of a herder who always knew the turn of season, not by cold or snow, but by the way the reindeer began to dream. "They flick their ears different," he said. "They breathe like they're waiting for something. Then it happens. You watch the breath clouds rise and fade." A scholarly insight notes that in Sami thought rest is not the opposite of movement. It is part of movement. The stillness of the herd is not a pause, but a phase. Like the moon between shapes, like a drum between beats, like the space between footstep and echo. You lie back into the snow. It is cold, but the kind of cold that cradles, not scolds. You look up. The aurora moves once more, slow and knowing. A line of green becomes a curve, then a thread, then a curl shaped like an antler, like a drum, like time remembering itself. Now you lie still, not with exhaustion, but with arrival. The reindeer breathe softly to your left. The snow breathes beneath you, and the drumbeat no longer heard continues in your chest, steady and slow. Above, the aurora has thinned into strands of silver and green, like ancestral thread, pulling the stars across their loom. The wind has quieted into a low, constant hush, neither absent nor active, just present like a hand resting on your shoulder after the story is done. You feel the world slowing, not ending, not sleeping, just gathering itself. You close your eyes. The scent of birch smoke still lingers in your collar. Your gloves are warm at the fingertips, and somewhere behind your thoughts, the vorbe still circles its last dance around a symbol you never saw, but which nonetheless carries you now gently into a place between names. The reindeer do not rise, the forest does not speak, the snow does not melt. Everything holds, just long enough for you to let go. And if you listen one last time, you'll hear it. That hum, that heartbeat, that memory, not from the drum, but from yourself, from this place you now carry, where time is hooved and circular, where seasons have breath, where stillness is not the end of the story, but the beginning of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.